All right, now it's time to make that main arpeggiated sound and really have some fun with the sound that we're going to build the entire song around. Okay, so I'm just going to open up a new MIDI track and we'll get Anna open as well, which will be what we'll use to build the whole sound. And also inside of the let me just press Command Option P to hide that plugin for a second. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the MIDI file that's under, in the MIDI folder for the entire session here, and it's called Arpeggio. And essentially what it is you can see I've got these really basic chords and they've been quantized exactly down to the grid. And I'm going to let's just get a basic sound inside of Anna so you can hear what these little chords sound like. So if I just initialize the preset here and take it off monophonic mode and hide the plugin window one more time, we can listen. Okay, and obviously that's just with a sine wave, but we'll make it sound a little bit better. Essentially though, it's just those chords I was playing when I was talking about the types of chord progressions that we're going to be using. And it's those first two chords which we will be arpeggiating. And you can see I've got a couple of different variations in here that I think are really helpful in, adding in a couple of extra notes here and there for the arpeggiator to grab onto, so that it's not the exact same thing every single time. And that's something that you'll also notice if you go back and listen to that main reference that we've been working from, that they do the same thing where there'll be one or two notes in that arpeggiator throws in there that aren't just the chords themselves. So if you do work like this, I would encourage you to just add in, a couple of little variations, something that sounds good to you that's real simple, and that's what I chose to do for this. As far as the sound goes, what we're going to be doing is using the arpeggiator inside of Anna here. And I've already initialized the preset here. So the first thing that we'll do is I'm actually going to start with the arpeggiator portion of it. Okay, so if you don't know where that is, it's at the very top, like in this top row here. You can click ARP and that will go to the arpeggiator, and just make sure that it's switched on at the top left. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to clear out the preset that it comes with, the arpeggiated preset, and I'm going to draw in my own. Now I know that there are about 4 notes inside of the chord that we've chosen. So as you can see, 1, 2, 3, 4. There's 4 notes here, and so that's kind of you get an option on this list here of which notes you want to be arpeggiated. So you could have a more complex chord and have a longer arpeggiation, but I know that I'm just going to use the first 4 notes. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to have it go down and up and down and up, but it's going to be longer than it's not just going to go like this. I kind of want it to extend a little bit further, so I'm going to have it go back up as well, and we'll have it repeat just like this. So it kind of sounds something like this. Okay, so this will be kind of the sound that we start with here, and let's start by, I always like to think about what we can do with the waveform first. Okay, so let's pick a more interesting waveform. I'm going to go with this more of a sawtooth waveform here, and I'll just turn it down temporarily, just something like this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to raise the octave to 1 here, and then I'm also going to increase the drift amount. Okay, so you'll notice that this is something that I do consistently for a lot of the sounds inside of this song, because that French touch sound has a lot of analog qualities to the synth. So since we're not working from actual analog gear, a good way to simulate that is to use a little bit of drift on the oscillator, so that it will the pitch won't be perfect every single time you play a note. In fact, it'll be slightly different every single time you play, which again emulates the analog style gear. So I really like to go up to somewhere around 15 is pretty reasonable. Anything above that, then it starts to get pretty crazy. So just use your taste for that. So let's go ahead and turn that up to 15 here, and I think we'll just turn this down slightly here. And then we'll add in another oscillator here. For this waveform, let's do more of a square shape, just to, because I find that if you stack too many sawtooths on top of each other, they tend not to complement each other. And now there's nothing wrong with it, but they sort of keep reinforcing the same harmonics. So it's kind of nice to add in, other types of waveforms to make it a little bit more complex, especially something that's repeating as often as an arpeggiated synth is. So let's turn the voices up to 1, and then we'll bring the volume up so we can actually hear it here. And then we'll also increase the drift amount for this second synth, or the second oscillator here. And you'll hear that there will be this kind of beating sound where they go in and out of tune. Which sounds really, really cool. So I'll keep the square a little bit louder than the first oscillator, so it has more of an influence on the entire sound. And then the next one, we're actually going to add in sort of like a bell sound here. So if you go to the waveform and you go to the waveform list, and you go to the 3D wavetables, you can choose between these different wavetables that as you morph it, like it will change the sound dramatically. Okay, so if we go to our oscillator mix, and I'm just going to solo oscillator 3 for a second here, and we change the voices to 1, and so you have a lot of control over the way that it sounds, and I really like to add in kind of a again, just something a little bit different than the square and sawtooths that we're used to. So I kind of wanted more of a bell sound, so that's why I added that one in here. So if we unsolo this and we listen to it in context with everything else, and let's actually increase the octave of this as well. And of course I am going to increase the drift amount here. Yeah, something like this. And actually, with this square wave too, I kind of wanted to maybe change something about the waveform just so it's slightly different. Maybe we can change the phase of it a little bit so it creates a little bit more of a complex waveform when it combines with the other stuff. Yeah, something like this. Now, let's go ahead and tackle. Actually, before we do that, let's add in one other very important element to the mix here, and that's going to be adding in a little bit of noise, because I noticed that with the lead sound inside of our reference, it is quite bright, and I really like to throw in a little bit of noise just to add in a little bit more randomness and increase the brightness. And so one really good way that you can do that is to use the white noise sampler portion for oscillator 4, right? So I'm just going to decrease the volume here, and we'll increase the high pass. And if I solo this is kind of what it's sounding like. So it adds like a really nice grit to everything. Yeah, just something like this, and then in context. A good rule of thumb too is to kind of turn down the white noise until you just it's just below the threshold where you can hear it, and I tend to really like the way that combines with everything else. If you kind of start with it loud, then it can feel like it overshadows everything else because noise is so powerful that way. So I kind of like to use that as a reference point. And if you were wondering if I'm going to increase the drift on the noise, yes, I am. Let's increase the drift on the noise just so that, again, it's ever so slightly different, and we can just add in that analog quality everywhere that we go inside of this patch here. So next up, we'll work on the amplitude envelope section, and I'm going to leave the attack right where it is, and we'll bring the sustain all the way down because I kind of want it to have a little bit more of a snap to the sound instead of, being like one thick waveform that extends all the way until the next note. So let's go ahead and do that, and then increase the decay time to roughly half a second here, and then the release time something like this. And that's kind of why I like to have the monophonic mode off, is to allow us to kind of have that bleed into the other notes. If I turn this on, no matter what I do with the release, it's not going to bleed into the next note. okay? So if I turn that on, you can hear it start to do that. I really like that. Next up too, let's go ahead, and what I'm gonna do is get the filter envelope to the type of setting that I want, and then once we apply the filter, then you'll hear it start to work as we drag the envelope amount up, okay? So generally, I kind of want the envelope to close relatively slowly, okay? So what we're gonna do is let's go to we're gonna increase the attack amount of the filter envelope a little bit here, and then we'll also increase the decay amount to, you know, I like to start around here, maybe around 1800 milliseconds, and then maybe we'll bring the sustain down somewhere around halfway here, and we'll increase the release time, something like this. So we've got kind of a slow, very subtle filter envelope happening, and if I bring the cutoff all the way down to a point where it's almost hard to hear, this is what the envelope is doing. Okay, so that's kind of the sound that we're going for. Now, since we're already in this filter section, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change it to a slightly different analog filter. I really like using this Ober low pass filter. They all, by the way, all of these analog filters sound completely different. So definitely experiment and try out all of them, because the more extreme settings that you have for the analog filters, the more they show their individual characteristics. And so definitely play around with each one of these and find ones that you like. But I really like the sound of this one, especially as you increase the resonance, which we'll do right now. I'm going to increase it to, you know, somewhere around 4 or 5, and keep the cutoff between 200 and 300 hertz. And let's also increase the drive amount, and we'll increase the envelope as well. Yeah, something like this. Yeah, there we go. So this sound is coming along so far. In order to add yet another analog quality, one other element that I really like to think about is applying an LFO to the phase of each one of our waveforms so that they change every single time we play them. So the way that we can do that is if we go to our LFO section here on the bottom right, and we change this to something like, you know, sample and hold mono, which means that it'll kind of go above the target amount every single time the, you know, LFO changes the value. So what we're going to do is set the LFO target to basically control oscillator 1 phase and oscillator 2 phase as well. And you'll kind of see what this starts to do if I just head over to oscillator 1 and 2. And let's bring the delay all the way down because we want it to engage basically right away. And then we'll turn off loop mode and just keep it on sync so that, you know, it's synced up to, let's say about 1/8, and then we'll increase the depth amount to 100%. So it's fully controlling the phase amount all the way. And then here's what happens is if we go to oscillator 1 and 2, you can kind of see that every single time we play the note, the phase changes in both of these oscillators, which adds just a whole nother set of like randomness to our sound, which I really like. So that's kind of a more of like a subtle touch to the entire synth, but I really like to do stuff like that just to emphasize that analog quality that we're going for. One big part of the sound that we're going for is that there's going to be quite a bit of automation at play in terms of like the filter cutoff and even perhaps like the attack amount of the filter and the amplitude envelope. And so what I like to do is set up a couple of different macros to make it really easy for us to control both inside of Ableton and inside of Anna as we kind of go through and design the sound how we want. So what I'm going to do to accomplish that is I'm going to go to the mod matrix, and this is such a fantastic place to view everything that's happening inside of your synth. So the idea is that I'm going to use macro 1 to control the filter cutoff of the entire synth. So if I just, if I set the source to be macro 1, and then I set, let's say if we go down to our filter menu, I say it's, filter 1 frequency. And then I can just kind of set the depth of how much I want the macro to be able to control the filter frequency. Okay, so I'm going to set it to about 28 here. And if I go to our macro section here and I rename this, let's say cutoff, not that, cutoff, you can really start opening it up over time like this. And the advantage to working this way too is that we don't have to work within a very small specific range inside of the original filter cutoff knob, which is right here. We can set a predefined range, which I believe I set at 28, where it's just a small amount, but we can move the knob all the way up and down in the automation, so we don't have to worry about those specific minimum and maximum values. So that's why I like to assign it to a macro. Now, another good use for macros is controlling multiple things at once. So I'm also going to do something where I assign the next macro over, so macro 2, to be able to control the attack of the amplitude. So if I go down to our amplitude envelope and amplitude envelope attack, okay, and then I'm also going to assign something else to macro 2, which is just the filter envelope attack as well, right? So if I go to our filter menu, our filter envelope menu rather, and then I set the filter envelope attack to also be controlled by macro 2. Now we have some very interesting ways that we can control the synth over time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring down the depth essentially of each of these macros to something like 17 here, and then I'm going to rename macro 2 to be attack. Okay, so now if we play this, let me open up the cutoff a little bit. We get some really cool options sonically to be able to control, some of those parameters very easily. Now, when we're actually inside of Ableton, what we can do is if I press Command Option P and hide the plugin window, and then if you click this little arrow here and you go to configure, it will bring open the plugin window one more time. And I'm just going to click, just normal click right on the macro 1 for the cutoff and macro 2, which is our envelope attack. And now this is actually assignable for automation inside of Ableton. So if we wanted to create a little bit of automation, we can easily do that just by right clicking. Same way that we would with any other thing in Ableton, going to show automation. Maybe we get our pencil tool out with B and we can create some different automation envelopes just to make things sound a little bit more interesting, right? If we go like this. And just create things that really, again, keep the listener's ear engaged by changing things over time. And this is going to be something that's going to be really handy for us to create that cinematic feel where we're opening things up over time, closing them, and really taking the listener on kind of an emotional journey as we change things sonically, and sometimes subtly, but sometimes not so subtly over time, right? So let's go ahead and just start with the cutoff all the way up and the attack all the way down. And if I go ahead and play it, yeah, we'll do something like that. And as far as the main sound is concerned, this is pretty much what I want to start with. The only other thing that I'm going to change is I'm going to go back to the arpeggiator. And I'm going to bring the gate down a little bit because I want it to pull those notes a little bit more. And essentially what it does is it shortens the notes for all of the times it arpeggiates, let's say. So you can hear what a difference that makes, right? Yeah, I just want it to be a little bit shorter so it'll sound something like this. Yeah. Then it might be nice to add in a little bit of delay here. Yeah, something like this. I love adding in delay like this. I'm just gonna increase the high pass a little bit, maybe darken up the delays so they're not so prominent. Yeah, something like that I think sounds pretty good. And then last but not least, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hide this plugin window one more time and just add in a little bit of reverb here. Yeah, something like this. Just add in some really nice space. And just to demonstrate real quick, what I want to apply here from what we were talking about with the chord progressions is just a really basic bass that changes and evolves with the arpeggiated notes here. So if I really quickly demonstrate this, I'm just going to have a sine wave here. But obviously, you know, we'll make it sound a little bit more interesting with the bass sound, and perhaps even add in a little bit of you know, arpeggiation on the bass sound itself. So that's what we'll take care of next.